and so forth. Basically, the US has certain switches at a top level where it's like, okay, we're going to cut off military aid, or we're going to do X, Y, and Z, which Japan can't retaliate against. And when we have seen
because the game of geopolitics is the game of creating dependencies.
Yes.
Once you create a set of dependencies, nobody can leave, right? So, like, one of the things, like the US's network that's most powerful is obviously the network of money, right? So now we're seeing probably
come back to
the
the point.
use
Yes.
of global swap lines as a weapon.
Yes. But so I agree, money's, so, it's kind of, you can reduce it, you can cut it different ways: money, morality, and Marshall, right? So money network, Marshall network, right? Okay. So the money network, you're totally on point with that. The moral network is the network of NGOs and human rights activists and so on and so forth, right? But if you read Easterly and Levine, or various kinds of studies on charity and aid, right? There's a good study on like Priceonomics, like Chris Blattner's written this up. One of the most effective, perhaps the most effective aid thing in the world was a business plan competition in Nigeria, right? Why? Because, charity and investment are both structurally similar in the sense of there's a queue of people competing to get some rich guy to give them money, okay? Or rich institution, whatever, right? The difference is that with charity, each person's incentive, let's say there's 100 people, each of those 100 people are incentivized to be the most pathetic, to be the most sympathetic, right? To get to the quote front of the line by either exaggerating or creating or imagining or talking up their various maladies and so on, so they can get that charity. In extremis, this leads to the scene in Slumdog Millionaire where, the guy chops off the limbs of that kid so they're a more attractive beggar, right? It's like learned helplessness, right?
Which happens in India. That happens.
Terrible things like that do happen. Exactly, right? So the point is that basically it's like learned helplessness. It's like be as pathetic as possible because that's the incentive structure that's set up. The most pathetic wins, right? The one who seems to be the quote most deserving of the charity. Conversely, with investment, if you have those 100 people and they're competing for venture capital, right? It's a completely different dynamic. They're all competing to be the strongest, fake it till you make it, right? And if you think about like there's one kind of instant bio which stresses that somebody is depressed and bipolar and they're a victim of this and that other group, right? That's the charity, that's a woke bio, right? The tech bio is, I have 2 degrees from MIT and I founded a company at this, and it's like the Insta brag, right? So, this is like the narrative of marginalization, and this is the narrative of, just execution. Okay. And I could probably come up with like a better, kind of thing, but the woke and tech narratives are the narrative for winning the charity game and winning the investment game. And they're just totally different if you think about them. It's literally just like self-abasement and self-actualization, just totally different. Okay. Here's the thing is in the charity model, those 100, and what I'm talking about, by the way, is organized charity, as opposed to like, people talk about institutional religion as opposed to like personal religion, right? Institutionalized charity, I'm not talking about you see your neighbor and they're down in their luck and you help them out. That's good because you have local information on the situation. The neighbor is not malingering.
And you probably have an ROI is measurable.
Yeah, and even if you don't have an ROI, if that guy is genuinely down on his luck and them and they're not a malingerer, they're not like a professional victim and so on, of course, you have local knowledge, you can go and help them out. It's a tough time, lightning hit their house. Of course, you're going to go and get a bucket and throw fire. Okay, right? That's different, okay? Institutionalized charity is grants and forms and all that type of stuff, which we're familiar with, the NGO industrial complex that creates dependency. Investment creates independency, okay? Because those 100 guys, even if only one of them gets the investment, the other 99, it's like running a 400 meters around the track. Even if you don't win the medal, the other 99, at least they get a workout. They were strengthened through the process. They made one more sale. They closed one more deal. They shipped one more product to try to get this investment. They didn't. You know what? They're stronger as a function of it. They've leveled up. This is a strengthening process. Yeah. And so the same money, that same $1,000 or $100,000 or $1 million that you give out, these two processes, this one creates dependency and gains status. This one creates independency and gains money. Okay. It's like these dual ways of looking at the world. Now, the thing about this is, the dependency thing, just to really put a point on it, like the only true charity is actually investment. Why? Because let's say there's some person, you haven't met them, they're homeless on the street. Okay. Are you going to give them 1% of net worth, 2%, 50? If you gave them, most people aren't going to give them 1% of net worth. Okay. That's already like a showstopper. I can't find, I've never been able to find a single person who says they believe in global equality, et cetera, who'd give 50% of the net worth to some random person. That would be a blow for global equality. But they don't actually want to do it, right? Because charity decelerates. The closer that guy rises to them, the more they feel, hey, I was working here and they weren't. I want to give them like some drips to make myself feel good, but I'm not actually going to lift them up. It's very difficult to lift up another human being. They need to have their own independent lift, right? So what they get are pets, right? That's what the NGO industrial complex is or was in India, in Africa, in South America. They wanted pets, right? This was like Sally Struthers, if you remember her in like the 80s, treated Indians as pets, okay? Because, they're starving and I'm like the white savior, coming in, petting them, right? The alternative is to treat them as human beings and do a manly handshake or a personly handshake, whatever. And now you're doing a deal with them and you're investing in their business. And now you treat them like a human being where, obviously, of course, they might make a mistake or something, but you expect them to lift themselves just as you will lift yourself. And both parties work to get that business off the ground. And so investment actually also crucially allows that person to potentially surpass you. Okay. As one very famous example, when Thiel invested in Zuckerberg, both got richer as a function of that, but Zuck became much richer than Thiel. Thiel started out richer than Zuck, invested in him. Zuck became much richer than Thiel. That's just a famous example. That same thing happens all the time when you invest in somebody's business and they do really well. You want them to become a zillionaire, and then you have a cut of that zillion, okay? And it doesn't have to be, by the way, on the scale of like venture capital. You could invest in somebody's, I don't know, you give them a loan or you give an equity investment in their farm or something like that. And you can do well in that. All these different kinds of finance, depending, you have to make the economics work, but you can make it work, okay? So the point is, this is really the, give a man a fish versus teach a man to fish proverb, just kind of explained out a little bit. But once you realize that the entire like US NGO network is to foster dependency in the name of charity, you can actually see this more clearly. For example, India was doing something. And I remember there's this viral thread on Twitter where like some British people were mad that they were doing it. And they're like, we're going to cut off their aid, right? 50 million a year, like the UK was paying. And Indians laughed for two reasons. First is it showed that charity was actually a hook, right? To keep them as pets. It showed it, the mask kind of dropped, right? You're doing something we don't want you to do. No, we're going to pull the money. Okay. They wanted pets. They didn't want actually independent agents, number one. And number two, $50 million. That's lol. Keep it, Britain. India doesn't need it. That's like one VC round. That's like a country to country aid. That's something that's like the change out of the back pocket for the Indian economy. Now we don't need it. We stand on our own 2 feet, right? That's how they become, authoritarian. Oh my God, threat to democracy, because they are independent. Once they're a threat to this social network's dominance, they're independent, right? So applying this filter though, which is kind of interesting, the fundamental thing the point I'm making is communism is not about like, seizures of farms or the revolt of the proletariat, whatever the Chinese Communist Party says it is. Democracy is whatever the US establishment says it is, no matter how much surveillance invasions they do. And if the other guy wins an election they don't like and does everything, that's still a threat to democracy, right? Okay. Once we understand this, that it's actually particularism in the name of universalism, right? Communism, democracy, these are nominally universalist ideologies, but they actually serve a particularist tribe, which is, the CCP and the US establishment respectively. That's like a totally different filter on the world. And it's got a lot of predictive value because just like I mentioned, that graph you can make of China and the Chinese establishment, you can literally parse Twitter and make a social graph of the US establishment. And there's like some nodes that are very central and others that are more, marginal, and those that are at the border. And then those that have like some linkages in, but really would be their own thing. Okay. And then you start getting now what's happened to the US is it's actually got not one subgraph, but two, right? So this brings us to a key concept of the network state.
But